Since starting this channel, I've been watching a ton of movies, whether it be for research for every Peter Pan film, or every Oscars film, or every John Ford film. I've been watching a lot. However, I still want to make sure I'm watching movies for pleasure too. And that's why for the past 4 years, my family and I have done an A to Z movie challenge, where we each take turns picking films starting with a letter of the alphabet, from A to Z. We watch all 26 films, and then we go through and rank them all. Today, I'm going to tell you guys about my last month doing this challenge, and we'll go through every single film, from All That Money Can Buy to Zelig. This challenge was completed by myself, my dad, my brother, and my mom, and we all take turns picking letters starting with A. I picked the A film, my mom picked the B film, my dad picked the C film, my brother picked the D film, and so on and so forth. So for the start of this challenge, I'm a classic Hollywood guy, and so I wanted to pick a film that's a little bit older, a little bit different, and I decided on All That Money Can Buy. All That Money Can Buy is an adaptation of the fable of the devil and Daniel Webster. It's about a guy who sells his soul to the devil in order to get ahead in life, and all of the issues that arise from it. It was actually really good. It's kind of like a dark comedy, somewhat of a thriller, and honestly, the ending was very impactful, especially for such an old film that definitely was within the Code era. There's also a little bit of a fourth wall break that I loved, and Walter Houston plays the devil in one of his best roles, including the Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Overall, this was a great way to start the challenge. For B, it was my mom's turn. And my mom, she tends to pick newer films, tends to pick more fluffy films, and that's not a bad thing. You know, unfortunately, my dad, my brother, and I subject her to some less than accessible films sometimes. And so for B, she picked the Whitney Houston film, The Bodyguard. The Bodyguard was really good. I think I liked it the least out of my family members, but it was fun. You know, it was about Whitney Houston. She's getting threats against her life, and essentially a bodyguard, Kevin Costner, is pulled in to protect her and serve her, and there's a romance aspect. It's fine. It's you know, kind of long, a little too long, very 90s, and a little bit forgettable, but at the same time, I'm glad that we got to start off with so much of a people pleaser, I suppose. It was now day 3 of the challenge, late June, and it was my dad's turn to pick a film. And, you know, we always try and pick good films. Sometimes we make mistakes. And my dad picked a film called Charlotta, which has great reviews online. It's considered one of the best films of all time on Letterboxd, IMDb, all over. But I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the fact that we watched it late at night, or maybe it just wasn't a good film, but this was really slow, really hard to get through, really hard to even understand what was going on. It was kind of a melodrama about, you know, love within a family, a cousin likes his sister, something along those lines. And I don't know, maybe we missed some of the subtleties of the story, but honestly, it peaked in like the first 10 minutes. They're playing a card game, and the card game was one I had never heard of, and it looked pretty cool. But beyond that, honestly, this was just... what a drag, unfortunately. And then, you know, my brother, he had the D film, and he picked The Dead, which was a John Huston film. And honestly, that was a bit of a drag, too. It was not even 90 minutes, but the film is essentially, its premise is about a man and a woman who go to a dinner party, and the woman accidentally reveals that, you know, she had a former lover that the man didn't know about. And that sounds interesting, it sounds intriguing, but that plot line really doesn't come into play until maybe minute 70, 75 out of 80. And so it's just crazy. It's really the last 5 or 10 minutes. And this was John Huston's last film. It had Anjelica Huston in the starring role. I don't necessarily think Anjelica Huston is the greatest actress. And honestly, none of my family was really a big fan of this one. For E, it was back to my pick, and I wanted to pick something that was a little better. We're off on, you know, 2 films that not everybody loved, and so I chose, again, an older film as an old classic Hollywood guy. I chose Easy Living, which starred Jean Arthur, and it was really good, I thought. It was a screwball comedy written by Preston Sturges, who is one of the masters of screwball comedies. It's about a guy who throws off his wife's mink coat off of the side of a building, and a woman catches it, and essentially this woman, Jean Arthur, basically falls into luck the entire film. She just falls into good fortune, and it's kind of cool. You know, it's almost like Mr. Magoo, how he tends to avoid death at all these in these crazy ways. It was basically that, but this is Jean Arthur just having the best luck of anybody ever, and it was good. It was fun. It was nice. It was a Depression era film, you know, Great Depression, and so it was kind of an escape for a lot of people back in the 30s, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good film. My family seemed to like it too. At this point, we're almost a week into the challenge, and it's my mom's turn again, and she picks Fast Times at Ridgemont High for her F, which this was great. I had never seen this. It's a little bit of an awkward movie to watch with your parents, but honestly, this was really good. A lot of the humor was surprisingly less misogynistic than I expected for an 80s film, especially like an 80s sex comedy, but honestly, it holds up all right, and it takes place in Southern California, and a lot of the filming locations I recognize as stuff that's very close to where I live. So it was a good movie. Occasionally, when we do challenges like this, there are films that we watch that I am absolutely dreading. We typically reveal the following day's letter after we finish the preceding film. And so my dad revealed that the G film would be Giant, the James Dean film that's 3.5 hours long. And I was dreading it. I had never seen Giant. It was one of those movies that I really should have seen, especially as a James Dean fan, as a Rock Hudson fan, as an Elizabeth Taylor fan. But I just was dreading it. The runtime was so staggering, and I didn't know if I would like it. But that's one of the great things about this A to Z challenge. Because of the nature of it, we're all paying attention to the films. We're giving it our best shot. You know, we're really hoping to like it, right? And so we watched Giant across 2 days. It was needing that, honestly. It's such a long movie, but it was really, really good. I mean, this is considered probably James Dean's finest role, and a lot of people don't watch it as much as his other films, especially just because of the length, but it's a very long epic about the oil industry in Texas in the 1800s. And yeah, I would say definitely if you are looking for a film that's long and that you can really sink your teeth into, that you can really learn a lot from, Giant is definitely a great pick. This is something that I'll totally revisit one day, but I'll give it a little bit of time just because it's so long. And so for the letter H, was my brother able to keep up the streak of really good films? I would say no. He picked Hot Shots, which is essentially the Abraham Zucker version of Top Gun. Honestly, this was just, it wasn't funny. I mean, Charlie Sheen's in it, which is an automatic decrease of a film by several points for me. I'm not a Charlie Sheen fan, and the humor just didn't really land. There were some jokes that were funny, but when there's 18,000 jokes in the runtime, of course there's going to be 1,000 that are funny, right? I mean, there's jokes every 2 seconds here, so give it a shot, I guess, if you're looking for kind of a stupid comedy, but I'd prefer to just rewatch Airplane, to be honest. At this point, we're over a week into the challenge. It's my third film, and for the first time, I picked a film that we weren't able to watch. I wanted to pick this movie called I'm Not There, which was not streaming. It was not able to be watched. And so at the last moment, I had to pick another film, which was Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This was the original. I had seen the remake before, but never the original. And honestly, it was good. It's a B movie. It's like 80 minutes as well. It's a very short one. And it could have been better. It could have been, obviously, with a higher budget, it could have been a bit more scary, a bit more practical effects. But, you know, the acting was kind of so-so. But honestly, if you're looking for like a B movie, this is up there with The Blob, you know, all these great 50s science fiction drive-in movies. And now, oh man, we get to the film that I think was easily the worst of the entire marathon. It was my mom's pick for Jay, and she chose Jury Duty. This was not the film she wanted to choose. She wanted to pick The Juror, but it wasn't streaming, so same issue. And Jury Duty is what we ended up going with. This was not funny. It was very, very poorly aged. Stanley Tucci said that this film was so bad that he was inspired to make his own films because he just couldn't stand being in it. It's Pauly Shore. If you like Pauly Shore, you know, you might be one of only 10 people in the world. And yeah, I would say completely skip this one. Nothing really worth seeing here at all. Not funny. Very transphobic, homophobic, racist. You know, it checks all the boxes. Luckily for Kay, my dad decided, you know, we just watched Jury Duty. He had a bit of a more out there pick, but he decided to go with more of a crowd pleaser just because we all wanted a palate cleanser after Jury Duty. And so he decided to go with Kate and Leopold. Kate and Leopold was a film from the early 2000s. It was actually our first post-2000 film so far, which was very surprising because in previous marathons that wasn't the case. But it's about a guy, Leopold, who is from the 1800s, and he accidentally gets sent forward in time where he falls in love with Meg Ryan, Kate, a woman from the early 2000s in New York. And honestly, this was just great. It was very, you know, it was a light rom-com. It was very well acted, very well directed, had, you know, a lot to like here. This isn't earth-shattering by any means, but honestly, I'm surprised that a lot of people say this isn't a very good film because I thought it was fun. It was very cute, very sweet, and it was a much-needed palate cleanser. Now for L, it was my brother's turn again, and I think this is one of our more controversial picks. He decided to pick a film called Le Trou, which translated becomes The Hole. And typically, when we watch foreign films, we go by the title, the foreign film title, like Charlotta, right? That was a C film. But Le Trou, I think, should be a T film because Le means the, right? But whatever. He wanted to watch this one. And honestly, this was an incredible movie. This was my number one. You'll see the ranking at the bottom. That was my number one film of the entire marathon. It was our family's number one film of the entire marathon. This was so good. It's about 4 convicts who are attempting to escape prison, and then a 5th person, just as they're about to escape, a 5th person is introduced to their cell, and they have to decide whether or not they want to tell him about their plan to escape. And man, I mean, this is one of those, stop the video right now and go watch this. Like, this was insanely good. I loved Le Trou. It has some really, really tense scenes, and honestly, I can't say too much about it because the more you give away, the less enjoyable it will be, but I think this would hold up on a rewatch too, like even knowing what happens. Like my heart was thumping. This was so tense, so well directed, well crafted. Definitely go watch Le Trou. If you're keeping track, M is my choice again, and I don't know if I picked the best film here. I picked Mr. Bug Goes to Town with my girlfriend's help, and honestly, this was fine. It was one of, it was an animated film from 1941. It's one of the few non-Disney animated feature films pre 1960, and it was okay. The animation's obviously not quite Disney standards, but it's still all right. The songs were kind of okay. The runtime was pretty padded, and honestly, I would say you're not really missing much by skipping out on this. But if you want to watch like an early 1930s, 1940s cartoon that kind of gives you that sense of that early cartoon era, this is definitely not a bad pick. N was back to my mom, and she picked Norma Rae. She's a huge Sally Field fan. You'll see Sally Field come up in her picks later on as well. And Norma Rae was good. It was about, a strike, a union, and it kind of is pertinent, considering what's going on with the writer's strike, right? And so it kind of hit close to home, I suppose. But it was good. It was a little long. I didn't like it as much as my mom and dad did, but they both grew up watching it, and so they kind of had that nostalgic factor that my brother and I didn't really have for it. But it was still fine. O was Old Joy. That was my dad's pick, and I wanted to like this one. Unfortunately, you can see by the average ranking, nobody liked it. I don't think it should have been worse rated than Jury Duty. It was fine. It was very pretentious. It's one of those kind of mumblecore films from the early 2000s where you can tell the people making the film think they're smarter than anyone else in the room. And yeah, if you're not into that, then definitely skip it. It just wasn't very good. It was very poorly made. And again, I'm not a huge fan of like that sort of like pretentious style of filmmaking where you can just tell people think they're better than you, right? But whatever, it's okay. It was only like 70 minutes. I didn't hate it. Luckily, my brother was able to kind of get the marathon back on track. He picked another good film following Le Trou. His next film was A Place in the Sun, which was another Elizabeth Taylor film. It was another George Stevens film, and this was really good. It was about a guy who essentially he gets a woman pregnant, and that's a pretty shocking story for the time, and it was one that I was surprised to see the way it went. It kind of is 2 films, but to spoil the first half and the second half would be spoiling kind of the climax, the crux of the film. So I'll be intentionally vague, but if you've seen A Place in the Sun, it's a good movie. It's kind of considered one of the classics of Hollywood. I would say definitely check it out. Elizabeth Taylor gives a great performance. Montgomery Clift, who I am not super familiar with, he's super good. Shelley Winters was good. Raymond Burr. Yeah, it was a good movie. Definitely check out A Place in the Sun. Very well paced, very well crafted, and I wish I could say more, but I don't want to spoil the film because it's definitely one you want to go in blind for. Okay, now I have a slight confession because our very first marathon, we did all 26 letters of the alphabet, right? But it's very hard to find a film starting with Q or with X. And so in future marathons, we've opted out of including those letters. That way, everybody gets 6 picks. It's nice and clean. But because of the title of this video, I wanted to actually watch a film starting with A through Z. So on my own, in between Place in the Sun and our R film, I decided to rewatch The Quiet Man, which was the John Ford, John Wayne film. I talked about it in the John Ford video. I talked about it in the 1953 Oscars video, and it's definitely one that you should check out. I think it's good. It's not great, but it has very beautiful cinematography, especially if you want to see what mid-century Ireland looked like. And honestly, it's pretty problematic, but it's good. It's fun. And back to R, that night we ended up watching my pick again for R, which was The Rocking Horse Winner, which was a very low-budget British film about a boy who can ride his rocking horse, and then he can eventually figure out which horse wins a horse race. It's kind of dark, very dark and depressing. I don't know. It didn't really land for me. My mom and dad both liked it. My brother hated it. I don't know. It was okay, but it was weird. Very, very interesting. Very hidden gem, I suppose. For some people, this might have been the least popular film we watched in the entire marathon. According to Letterboxd, only less than 600 people have logged this film ever. And yeah, I don't really even remember how I found it. It was a weird choice. I don't know exactly why I picked it. Luckily for S, my mom went back to the crowd pleaser route, back to the Sally Field route, and she picked Smokey and the Bandit, which is just a great movie. I mean, Smokey and the Bandit is kind of like dumb fun. You're not going to gain any brain cells by watching this, but if you want to see cars chase each other for 2 hours, this is definitely the way to go. Burt Reynolds is great, Sally Field is great. It's just a good movie. I actually want to see the sequels now too. And if you're looking for something that's kind of light and airy, especially after some of the movies we've watched, we've been watching a lot of melodramas. This definitely was a good pick for S, and I think my mom did a good job here. Okay, now for T, which was easily the biggest discrepancy we've ever had between opinions, because my mom and my brother hated The Tin Drum, which was my dad's pick for T, but I loved The Tin Drum. You can see where my ranking is. I think that this movie was so out there. It's essentially about a little boy who, when he's 3, he decides he wants to stop growing up, and so he throws himself down the stairs, and then he permanently stops aging. And it is wild. I mean, it's very, very German, very interesting, because it's about kind of the start of World War II. So you see the Nazis, and there's a lot of places this film goes that you kind of wonder, like, why did they do this? A lot of practical effects. You kind of wonder, was there animal abuse? There's a lot of nudity that's pretty questionable. But honestly, I don't know why I enjoyed this so much. I think it's a film that you would never see get made in America. It was so out there, so crazy. And it's exactly why my brother and my mom didn't like it. But I loved it. I thought it was so funny. I thought the little boy was really, really talented. And yeah, if you're looking for something that's so unlike anything you'll ever see again, definitely check out The Tin Drum, but viewer discretion is completely advised. It's a little interesting. As I mentioned, we usually reveal what the following day's film is at the end of the preceding film, and so a lot of the time what we end up picking is kind of reactionary to what we just watched. And as I said, my brother hated The Tin Drum, and so for you, he decided to pick something that was very much a palate cleanser. It was the shortest film we've ever seen in the marathon. It was the 52-minute documentary Under the Stars, which is about drive-in theaters. And no, it wasn't, I don't know why necessarily he picked it. Again, it was kind of a palate cleanser. That was the intent. But it was very, very light. 52 minutes. You see like 6 or 7 drive-ins throughout the country. There's not really much to talk about here. I don't know. It was all right. Now we're at V, which was my final pick of the marathon, and I decided to go with the Olympics documentary, Visions of 8. It's made by 8 people, and it's kind of 8 different vignettes, 8 different stories about the Olympics. And so it's kind of interesting. One segment deals with bodybuilders, one segment deals with the marathon, one segment deals with gymnasts. And I thought it was good. My family thought it was a little slower than I did. I think my dad liked it probably the most of anybody, but he's a big Olympics guy. He worked in the LA Olympics in the 80s. And I think it was good, definitely not my best pick, but as a way for me to end the marathon, it wasn't bad. Now we're on my mom's last pick, and as I mentioned earlier, for B, she picked The Bodyguard, which was a Whitney Houston film. Now she decided to pick a Tina Turner film, What's Love Got to Do with It, this was okay. I didn't love it. It's very, very good. It's very well made. The music is, of course, great. It's Tina Turner, right? But it was almost too much torture. Angela Bassett plays Tina Turner, and she's just getting abused by Lawrence Fishburne for basically the entire runtime. Tina Turner herself famously said she didn't like the movie. She thought it was too much. It was unbearable to watch, and I kind of agree. I don't really want to see somebody get abused for 2 hours straight, but the music was good. And now again, X we typically skip, but I decided to watch X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes, which was directed by Roger Corman. I love Roger Corman. I think his movies are super interesting. My brother, my dad, and I actually met Roger Corman a few years ago. We watched The Mask of the Red Death with him, and then we did a Q&A with him, and that was an awesome experience. So I've always been a Roger Corman fan. X, The Man with the X-Ray Eyes was just okay, but it's a movie that started with X, which is pretty rare, so, I didn't expect too much. Now nearing the very end here, my dad picked for his final film, the Y film, You Only Live Once, which is kind of a loose adaptation of the Bonnie and Clyde story. I thought it was incredible. It is Sylvia Sidney and Henry Fonda in the title roles, and yeah, it was just really well made. I think I was the person who liked it the most, but it's a very good noir, very gritty, very well made. Not much to say about it, honestly. Fritz Lang directed it, and honestly, if you're looking for a good noir you might not have heard of, check it out. But finally, to end off the marathon on an okay note, kind of a whimper more than a triumph, we had Zelig, which was a Woody Allen film. I'm not a huge fan of Woody Allen films. I'm obviously not a fan of him in real life. But even before, the stuff about him and his stepdaughter came out, I still think his movies are kind of in similar vein to Oldboy. They're a little bit pretentious. You kind of get the sense that he thinks he's smarter than you. But I don't know. It's Woody Allen. At least his movies are still entertaining. Zelig was good. It's about a chameleon. It's kind of the Forrest Gump story about a guy who has been through it all, kind of is always, he's changing with the times. It was okay. It was like a faux documentary, so the entire movie was made to seem like it was a documentary on Zelig. There were parts that really served the story. Like, I loved the bits that showed like the Zelig merchandise, but ultimately I kind of wanted to just see a bit more of a straightforward telling of the story. It was fine though. It wasn't the best way to end the marathon. But yeah, for 4 years in a row now, my family and I has watched 26 films together, starting with every single letter of the alphabet, all A to Z, right? And it's a great thing to do. If you're looking for some new way to pick a movie every night, this is a great way, especially if you can get a lot of people involved. It's a lot of fun, and I think we're definitely going to keep doing it next year. It'll be year 5. I know this is a super different video for me. I wanted to do a face cam for this video, but I couldn't get it working. And so maybe we'll try and do that again in the future. But yeah, thank you everybody for sticking through the channel so far. I'm really excited to see where it keeps going from here. We're about to hit 1,000 subscribers, not about, but we're getting there. Slowly but surely we're getting there. And I can't thank you all enough for all of the kind comments, all of the, the great interaction. And it's been a lot of fun. I love telling stories about old Hollywood, but I also love doing videos like this where I get to just be a bit more casual and just talk to the viewers straight up. And if there's any videos you want to see, let me know. I'm always down to take suggestions, feedback. There's a lot of people who have given me feedback for different types of videos, and I love it. I welcome it all. We have some more videos coming out in August. I think I'm going to do a video on Rin Tin Tin, the dog, the German Shepherd, and we'll see, maybe a video on how the West was won, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see where we go from here, and thank you all for sticking through this channel, for seeing it grow, and let me know where you want to see it go next. But until then, until the next time, I'll of course see you at the movies.